think it's safe to say that drones and UAVs have changed the game in video production when it comes to getting amazing and affordable aerial shots that in the past wouldn't have been possible. Hi, my name is Charles Yeager for Tuts Plus, and in this course we're going to learn about the innovative world of UAVs and how to achieve cinematic shots that were once limited only to big budget productions. You'll also learn how to fully implement UAVs in your own production workflow. We're going to be covering everything from UAV uses, cameras and gear, to shooting techniques, weather factors, as well as routine maintenance and how to plan for a shoot. We'll also look at current FAA guidelines and the process for obtaining a commercial use exemption from the FAA. We'll also look at how to obtain UAV insurance and more. You're going to learn a ton from this course, and it's a great course for people that are new to drones or if you want to take your skills to the next level. Make sure you check out the next lesson. We're going to look at all the different project uses for UAVs. We're going to answer the question, are drones right for your project? In this lesson, we're going to answer the question, are drones right for your project? We're also going to look at some ways you can use drones in your projects that you might not have considered. As a side note though, before we get started, throughout this course, I'm going to be using the term drone to describe these unmanned aerial vehicles that we're going to be working with. They go by many names: UAVs, UAS, quadcopters for those with 4 propellers, octocopters for those with 8 propellers. The term drone seems to be the most common terminology out right now and is used the most when describing these aircraft. We'll start with the question, are drones right for your project? Well, do you need aerial video or photos for your project? If the answer is yes, then I would highly recommend using a drone for your project. The reason for this is because there really is no other cost-effective way available right now to get aerial shots. This is part of the reason drones have skyrocketed in popularity over the past few years. If you just go back 5 to 10 years ago, most of the aerial shots we're getting now from drones were not possible. And in order to even get aerial footage, you would have had to rent a helicopter and pay a pilot to fly you around. This meant that aerial footage was limited only to big budget productions and Hollywood movies. Aerial drone shots are kind of unexplored territory for the low budget and indie filmmaking community. When you see and experience an aerial shot in video, it's almost hypnotizing to see the landscape from this new perspective that really isn't like any other shots we're used to seeing. The slow cinematic movement of drones and even the ability to just sit idle in one place in the air, that's something that's completely new that even a helicopter can't do effectively. There is a learning curve that comes with flying drones, but after about 10 or so practice flights, you should have enough basic coordination to get the shots you need. Just remember to always be safe and stay within your means. Now, if you don't require high above aerial shots for your project, there's actually a lot of other uses for drones that you might not have considered. Often a small drone can replace a lot of large and heavy equipment that might not be as mobile on a shoot. Jib shots and long dolly shots are a good example of this. Obviously the pros using a drone instead of a jib would be the amount of equipment that you would have to haul and set up. A lot of heavier jibs require more than one person to operate as well. So if you're on a budget, often a drone can be a much cheaper solution to hiring an extra gaffer or somebody else to help you with a jib. Not to mention a smaller drone can be carried in a small backpack or carrying case. This drastically increases your mobility for your shoot, and in many cases won't require you to rent a larger vehicle because now you don't have to haul around all that extra equipment. Pros of using a drone instead of a dolly would be that you're no longer limited to the length of your dolly track. You don't have to spend a lot of time setting up and balancing your track. Since the drone is in the air, you don't have to worry about the rough terrain. Drones can even be a substitute for filming from a vehicle depending on your shot needs. Often a camera can be tough to balance on or from the window of a car, and again, depending on the terrain, this can affect the stability of the shot. With a drone shooting from the air, you're going to take the terrain out of the equation. Now, there are other cases where a drone might not be the best choice for your project. Weddings are a good example of this. Now, a drone may be great to get shots of the bride and groom before the service, but I would never expect to see a drone flying around when a wedding's taking place. The fact is, they're just too loud and distracting for any scenarios like that. Anything with dialogue will obviously also pose a problem because again, all you're going to be able to hear is just a humming coming from the drone. And a lot of drones don't even record audio because of this. But that's fairly obvious, and I would think that most people would expect to be recording the audio separate anyway, or at least doing audio dubbing after the fact. If I have a drone shot that requires actors' audio being recorded, what I'll do is I'll get my aerial shot first, then I'll land my drone and safely power it down. Then I'll walk to that location with a mobile recorder, have the actors repeat their audio. That way I can just sync that up in post, and it's going to save me a lot of post-processing from having to match audio that I might record in a studio. A drone will also put out a fair amount of wind. Nearly all of it's going to be directly below the drone, so this shouldn't pose much of a problem. But if you're trying to capture a shot directly above someone, which really aren't recommended for safety reasons, just know there's going to be a fair amount of wind pushing down on them. This will also stir up quite a bit of dust if you're filming in an area that is dry or sandy, so you want to be careful because this dust can kick back up and get on your drone and your camera. It won't pose a big hazard to the flight of your drone, but the last thing you want to have happen is get all your actors set up and ready, and then right before the shot you take off with your drone and you stir up a bunch of dust in the location and in the environment, and it gets on the actors. Make sure you take off a moderate distance away or a few minutes before your intended shot. Also, it's good to know that animals will easily be spooked by the drone floating in the air. Some animals will run away, other animals like dogs may bark at it or even chase after it, so just be mindful when shooting around animals, and it's probably not a good idea to shoot at a zoo. Flying indoors is kind of a gray area. Even if you're really well experienced, I don't recommend it, so if you're just starting out, I would definitely avoid flying indoors altogether. I recommend logging at least 100 flights or more before doing a test flight indoors, and you also want to make sure you have the right drone for that type of work. Some newer drones such as the DJI Phantom 3 and the Inspire 1 come equipped with a vision positioning camera underneath the drone to help keep it steady when it comes close to the ground, even without a GPS signal. So this can make flying indoors much easier. However, I still don't recommend flying in anything smaller than a large maintenance garage or warehouse, just because things can go wrong really quickly. In the next lesson, you're going to learn some general information about drones such as technical specs and limitations that are really good to know if you're a beginner UAV pilot. In this lesson, we're going to learn some general information about drones, focusing in on their technical specs and limitations, which is going to help us greatly when planning for a shoot and how to execute the shots we need. I've had a couple of drones for about 2 years now, and I can tell you before I purchased them, I had little to no experience with RC aircraft. So I'll explain some of the things I learned when I first got introduced to drones. I'm primarily going to be focusing on the DJI Phantom 3, the Phantom 2 with the H3 3D gimbal, and the Inspire 1. Since I would expect these three models to be the most popular among drone users, I'm going to compare and contrast a lot of differences between them. I'll start off with one of the most asked drone questions, which is what is the flight time per battery? This is roughly going to be about 10 to 14 minutes. Most drones claim more time on their specs from about 20 to 23 minutes. However, this is if you drain the battery completely, and that isn't recommended for most drone flights. It's a pretty common practice to begin to land your drone with about 40 to 35% of battery left on the LiPo batteries. This helps prolong their life, and also if you can't land immediately, you've got a little bit of extra juice just in case you need to stay up in the air. And this brings up my next point about batteries. They have a shelf life. They will eventually bloat up and expire. That's not saying your drone is just going to fall from the sky, but after repeated use, the batteries tend to inflate, and once they reach a certain level, it's recommended that you dispose of them properly, because they can pose a fire hazard and even explode. And if your battery ever inflates to the point where it won't fit in your drone, or if you see any fluid leaking from it, dispose of the battery immediately. Flying until the battery is close to zero every flight, or banging the batteries around will cause them to inflate quicker. So don't just leave them rolling around the trunk of your car. Secure them in a case and avoid leaving them in a hot environment or in direct sunlight. With proper maintenance, it actually does recommend draining the battery fully about every 15 flights. And if you store the batteries at about 50% charge, you can expect the batteries to last about 1 to 2 years or roughly 200 flights. Some could last even longer, others not. They retail for about $100 to $200 a piece, so that's just something to keep in mind. Next is the first person view transmitter type, also known as FPV. I knew nothing of these when I was first interested in drones, and it's often a cost that most people don't factor in. Depending on which drone you choose, you have different methods of observing the footage from your controller. There are two main types, digital antenna and Wi-Fi signal. Digital antenna is definitely the less superior of the two, and it's typically going to be used with a Phantom 2 and a GoPro. In my opinion, this method of observation is getting outdated quickly, but is by far the cheapest way to view your footage live if you need to view the film from a GoPro camera. The major disadvantages with this setup would be the SD signal. This usually has quite a bit of static, but is still quite manageable. The range is also quite short, typically cutting out around 400 to 600 meters away. One advantage is they're simple to use once they're installed. You just turn them on and go. And they also have a matte screen, which is a bit easier to see in the bright daylight. These systems are third-party FPV kits that you can buy and install yourself or buy pre-installed on a Phantom 2. They typically run about $500 to $600. A much better solution is the Wi-Fi transmitter types. These are on the DJI Phantom 3 and the DJI Inspire 1. These work through a wireless signal sent from the drone to a smartphone or tablet on your controller. This signal is typically much stronger. It's HD with a much longer range, cutting out around 500 to 2,000 meters away depending on the surrounding terrain. It works through the DJI Pilot app, which also gives you a real-time feedback of the status of your drone and you can selectively record or take photos as opposed to the Phantom 2, which you pretty much have to record the entire flight. The older DJI Vision Plus works through a similar app, and the camera on the Vision Plus is limiting in my opinion, which isn't up to par with the GoPro or the new Phantom 3. Also, just as a side note, it's not recommended to use the GoPro Wi-Fi app on your phone as an FPV unit because it's been claimed the signal can interfere with the controller and cause malfunctions. I've heard pros and cons of its use from both sides. However, DJI doesn't recommend it and it could void your warranty if you're in an accident while you're using the GoPro Wi-Fi app. When it comes to distance and elevation limits on your drone, typically your FPV transmitter is going to cut out before your radio signal does. This is both good and bad. It's good because once the signal starts cutting out, this can kind of serve as a warning that you may want to come back and get into range. It's bad if it cuts off completely because then you're flying blind. And unless you can see your drone, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to navigate back into range. Not to worry though, because this brings up my next topic of GPS fail-safe systems. All of the drones I mentioned throughout this course are equipped with GPS fail-safe systems, and I believe this is going to be one of the functions that's going to be mandatory on all the drones in the future. With the GPS fail-safe system, a drone will automatically fly back to where they originally took off from, guided by their built-in GPS. This will typically bring a drone that may have flown out of range back into range so the pilot can regain control. Some drones even have a return to home button that can be pressed, bringing the drone back automatically, even if it's still in view. These functions help prevent what are called flyaways, in which case a drone might drift out of range and then eventually crash down. DJI and the FAA both recommend limiting your flight height to around 400 feet and limiting your drone range to 400 meters or about 1,200 feet. That's about a quarter mile away. Their main recommendation is just to keep it within eyesight. So if you can see it, you're safe. In the next lesson, we're going to go over some of the most common drone cameras. We're also going to look at some accessories and travel gear that are going to be essential for your drone projects. In this lesson, we're going to go over some of those common cameras associated with drones. We're going to compare and contrast them and see which ones are a best fit for your project. We're also going to examine some accessories and gear that you might want to utilize during your drone work. When it comes to camera options, you're probably going to want to pick a drone that has the right focal length for your project, since a lot of beginner UAVs don't have cameras that have interchangeable lenses. So let's examine some lens specs for some more common drones. The Phantom 3 and the DJI Inspire 1 both have a 20mm equivalent camera mounted, which is not going to have the fisheye distortion that a GoPro is going to have, and it's going to have less of a jello effect in my opinion. A lot of drones utilize the GoPro camera, and GoPro has a much more wide-angle view option, as well as options to crop in to a medium and narrow view. However, in my experience, the quality drops off quite a bit more the more you crop in on the camera, so it's probably a good idea just to go ahead and film in 4K and reduce the fisheye effect in post. Now, which one is better, you might ask? Well, that's going to depend on what your project needs are. If you're filming aerials for a real estate video and you want the video to be easy on the eyes and represent the property in a commercial fashion, I'd recommend using the Phantom 3 or the Inspire 1 since it films with a 20mm focal length. However, if you're filming for an extreme sports video or you want to capture a super wide landscape shot, I'd recommend a drone like the Phantom 2 that houses a GoPro camera. If you're interested in which camera has better overall performance regardless of focal range, it might come as a shock, but I believe that the GoPro Hero 4 Black has better dynamic range and sharpness than the DJI Phantom 3 or the Inspire 1. But again, it depends on your needs. But if you think about it, this kind of makes sense because GoPro has been focused on cameras and image quality, where DJI is just now getting into the camera game. This doesn't mean that DJI cameras are bad, and I actually use DJI more than I do GoPro. However, the DJI footage suffers greatly from moire issues, unless you really dial down the sharpness, after which the footage can look a bit smudgy. However, if you're recording in 4K and you output the footage to 1080p, you can get quality results. I just make sure you always film in 4K. Now, the GoPro is a bit more of a hassle when you're filming in 4K, mainly because of the files. The codec's not very friendly, so playback on a computer can sometimes be slow when you're trying to edit it. However, if you film in 4K and you output that out to 1080p, your final video is going to look great. The 4K works wonders at retaining image quality when you need to counteract the lens distortion in post. You're also going to need to purchase a lens hood for your GoPro. This is going to help prevent the strobing effect from the sun flaring through the blades. I also wouldn't recommend any GoPro models below the Hero 3 Plus or the Hero 4 Silver or Black. The reason is these models allow you to manually adjust more options like the ISO and exposure. These options are what allows the GoPro dynamic range to really shine. Otherwise, you get footage with a lot of blown out skylines, and that's not very cinematic. The next thing is the travel case. This is something that without a doubt you need. It's just going to be a huge pain trying to keep with all the separate pieces of the drone, especially when you're moving around. It's just a smart move to invest in a quality case that you can store your drone in, so if you have to travel, you're all set and your drone will be secure. Most of these will run around $250 to $500 price range, comparable to a good Pelican case. They also make some cool travel backpacks that are great for transporting drones on hikes. Now, if you're new to flying, or if you're going to be flying in a place with lots of obstacles, or if there's going to be people in the vicinity, I highly recommend using prop guards if they're available for your drone. When it comes to the use of prop guards, I always say it's not a matter of if you're going to crash, but when. It's just part of the learning curve when you're learning the limits of your drone, which is also why it's important to really get in a lot of practice before you use one in a public space. Prop guards are going to save you from a lot of close calls, like if you accidentally bump into a branch, or if you land too hard and the drone tips over. Finally, the last item I'm going to mention are controller lanyards. A lot of people prefer to use them, and they can help free up your hands and give you the option to fly using what's called the fingertip method. I personally don't use controller lanyards, they just don't match my flying style and they kind of get in my way. But like I said, a lot of people use them. And as a beginner, you may want to use them for your first couple flights until you get the hang of things. In the next lesson, we're going to learn some shooting techniques to get more cinematic footage from your drone. In this lesson, we're going to be learning about aerial shot techniques and how multiple axes of movement can lead to more cinematic and better looking footage. We'll start by examining a few basic shooting rules that should be applied to all of these shooting techniques. The first shooting rule I'll recommend is just to go slow. Slow is going to be more cinematic. It gives the viewer the impression you're shooting from a larger platform, such as a helicopter, which is subconsciously going to increase the production value. And it's going to make a shot appear more controlled and crafted. It's easy to get the need for speed when you're first starting out flying, and that can work in some cases, but a lot of times it's going to result in really turbulent and shaky footage, especially when there's a lot of wind. You're not flying in a drone race, so don't rush your shots, and always remember to fly through your shot, giving you a couple extra seconds afterward just in case you need that when you're editing. Also, go easy on the sticks with gradual movements. And remember to accelerate and decelerate slowly, otherwise you're going to jar the camera around with the quicker movements, increasing the odds of having the jello effects on your footage. Pre-planning and visualizing your shots is going to help a lot. It's also going to help you optimize your battery life when you're trying to get those shots. So you don't run into a situation where you miss the shot you truly need because your batteries are out of power. It's a common practice for a drone pilot just to sit for a few minutes and close their eyes and visualize the exact flight maneuver they're wanting to accomplish, even thinking how they're going to move the controls during the shot. This can help make the maneuver moves second nature when the shot's actually taking place. Finally, before we get into specifics, don't be afraid to imitate big budget shots you see in movies, which are typically going to have two axes of movement at the same time, such as flying backwards and upwards at the same time at a smooth, steady rate. We'll explore this more later on in this lesson. The first shot technique we're going to explore are called strafe movements. Strafe movements work quite well for showing landscapes from a different perspective. Since most landscapes are shown on aerial videos with the drone only moving forward or backwards, a strafing shot can stand out and can also act as an effective way to reveal cool features in the terrain. Orbits are another way to give a good cinematic look to a shot. This can be achieved by having your drone strafe to the right or the left, and also pulling on the yaw stick in the opposite direction. It's crucial to really go easy on the yaw, however, or you'll end up spinning your drone too quickly and spoiling the effect. DJI has vastly made this technique easier by integrating an intelligent flight mode on their DJI Pilot app. This will make the drone fly orbits automatically. We're going to explore the DJI Pilot app later on in this course. A fly-through shot can also be quite effective. However, they're going to be the most risky since you're going to be relying only on your FPV in order to navigate your drone. I wouldn't attempt this unless you're 100% confident in your piloting skills. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of these shots, mainly because when I see them, it's a telltale sign that the shot was filmed with a drone. And this may distract your audience because they might be thinking more about the risk of the shot and not admiring the cinematography. You can also add gimbal movements into your shots combined with dual axis movement, so this will effectively give you 3 different axes of movement. One of my favorites is flying forward and tilting the gimbal upwards to reveal the landscape. This reminds me of the opening helicopter scene in Jurassic Park. Another gimbal shot I like is moving the drone up vertically while tilting the gimbal down. This gives the shot a nice vertigo effect, giving the viewer an idea of how high up the shot actually is. You can also add depth to your scene by using extreme parallax effects, often with trees or structures closer to the drone, which helps provide a visual aid for the viewer on how large the surrounding landscape actually is. One camera move I really don't recommend that much is just rotating the drone on the yaw axis, effectively the same as a 360 panning shot. This is because typically a drone will have a hard time being precise with this movement, and it can give the footage kind of a whip pan effect if you're not careful. Not to mention you're going to get the least amount of parallax and it will almost seem as if you're just painting the camera on a hilltop as opposed to getting a nice aerial shot. That's not to say you should never do a 360 panning shot, but if you do, you may want to use a drone such as the DJI Inspire 1 that can rotate its gimbal independently of the drone. That way it's just rotating the gimbal and not having to rotate the entire drone, which could shake the footage around. Get creative with your own shooting techniques and don't be afraid to combine two different types of shots together. An example would be using an orbit shot and then switching it into a strafe shot. There's lots of possibilities to explore and create your own unique shooting style. Just remember to study your location before you take flight and fly safely. In the next lesson, we're going to examine the different types of weather you may encounter and how they can affect your shots. We're also going to look at some suggested flying conditions. In this lesson, we're going to look at the different types of weather you may encounter when you're flying your drone and how this can affect your shots. We're also going to look at some suggested flying conditions and when you probably should not fly your drone. For the most part, weather at a particular location is out of our control, aside from choosing a different day to shoot on, but in some cases this may not be possible with deadlines. So you'll need a good understanding of how different types of weather can affect your shots. Typically, you're just going to want to fly on clear or cloudy days with little to no wind. On a clear day, there will be numerous shadows cast down on the terrain, and the time of day will play a factor in this, but generally during midday, the shadows will be at their smallest. On partially cloudy days, large shadows from different clouds will be cast down on the terrain. This can either help or hurt your shot, depending on what you're looking for. I personally like these large shadows because it gives the scene a good sense of depth and scale as it moves toward the horizon line. However, if you're getting shots of a location, and part of the location is covered in large cloud shadows, this can be distracting and can even make the location look less flattering. It can also make it difficult to expose your drone camera properly because of the darker areas in the shadows. On days that are completely overcast, your skyline is not going to appear appealing, but overcast days act as a giant softbox for the sun's light, scattering it more, which will actually give you the ability to capture some really saturated terrain shots without any harsh shadows at all. One of the drawbacks to this though is that the terrain can come off as looking very flat because there's a lot less contrast on the scene. Wind is also going to be your biggest enemy when it comes to the dreaded jello effect on your footage. If you can, avoid trying to get your shots on a windy day. I typically don't fly when the winds are over 20 miles per hour, especially with heavy gusts. Most drones are ready to fly in up to 25 to 35 mile per hour winds. However, the footage probably won't even be worth your time. And if you fly a smaller drone, such as the DJI Phantom 2 or 3, you'll really need to be mindful of the wind when you're capturing footage at high speeds. A basic rule is the smaller the drone, the more sensitive it's going to be to wind. Larger drones have a better time balancing and they won't be able to be pushed around quite as easily as a smaller drone. I also wouldn't recommend relying too heavily on programs like After Effects to remove the gel effect from your footage if you do end up using them. Although After Effects can do a pretty good job of removing these effects, I've never seen it remove the gel effects completely. Gel effects can be very distracting for viewer or clients, and it's a telltale sign that your footage was shot with the drone in subpar conditions. If you absolutely have to film on a windy day, keep your drone movements to a minimum. Honestly, I would not even move the drone at all because your drone is going to get bounced around by the wind even more while it's trying to move around. And if some shot movement is a must, only use your gimbal to rotate and not the actual drone. And finally, on some days, you're just going to want to avoid flying your drone altogether. Avoid flying when there's rain, misting, or real heavy fog. Particularly on colder days, since the condensation can develop on your drone and the props, which can freeze at higher altitudes. This can cause your drone to have an unpredictable movement and be much less responsive. I myself have actually witnessed the DJI Phantom 2 fall from the sky because of frozen condensation that developed on the props. You'll have to remember that a lot of wind is passing through the props of the drone, and when this happens, the props act like a filter, capturing all of the moisture on the prop blades. Even on warmer days when you fly your drone through heavy fog, you're going to see moisture and condensation develop on the props and the drone. Recommended flying temperatures are between 15 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit, or -10 and 40 Celsius. And again, be very mindful of your drone when flying at the ends of these spectrums. Often these extremes will have a direct effect on battery flight times. In the next lesson, we're going to examine how flying at different times of the day can affect your footage. In this lesson, we're going to look at the best times during the day to get the most cinematic shots with your drone, and we're also going to look at the differences between footage shot at different points in the day. The first thing you know is quite often we may not have a choice as to what time we shoot our aerial video, because quite often a shoot has been set up in advance and you may only have a set time period available, so it's all or nothing. And that's okay, you can still get good looking aerial footage. However, if you do have the opportunity to choose the times of day, there are two different times that I highly recommend, and that's the golden hours of the day at sunrise and sunset. Basically the first hour when the sun rises in the morning and the hour just before the sun sets in the evening. Just like with ground-based cinematography, the golden hours of the day will really help your footage stand out. And a lot of directors and cinematographers that I've worked with specifically request shooting only at these times of the day. Shadows will be visible, helping to define the terrain features that aren't as visible during the afternoon. Also, just fewer people film at these times, so just by doing this one step, you're already going to differentiate your footage greatly from the mass of other aerial footage that's already out there. Sure, it may not be fun waking up at 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning, but once you get back to your computer and you're reviewing the footage, you'll quickly realize how something so simple can change your footage in such a big way. Sunrise is by far the most desired time to shoot aerials for a few reasons. The first, and as I stated earlier, most people just won't put in the effort to wake up this early and shoot at this time. The sun will be casting a beautiful golden light on terrain that will cast longer shadows, and this will help define and even flatter the terrain features. And because we're seeing light come in from an angle that's only there at a limited time during the day, this is going to make the footage even more desirable. But sunrise still has another trick up its sleeve, and that's the morning mist and fog is often associated with sunrise. And this is what vastly separates sunrise from sunset. The fog and the mist from the cool humidity that developed during the night will have burned away by mid-afternoon, and they won't be around for sunset. This fog can give you a great sense of atmosphere to the scene, and the light will be diffused on the fog's surface. The one thing you will need to watch out for during the golden hours of sunrise and sunset is because the sun is at such a low angle, you'll be prone to a lot of light flares on your footage if you're facing the sun directly. This can really wash out the contrast of your footage or just completely overpower the footage altogether with blown out highlights. Sunset also offers some unique shooting options as well. If the fog effect is not for you, then you probably want to shoot at sunset. You can get some really great silhouetted terrain at sunset that can offer a great variety of colors that will likely fade into a nice purple tone. And this can also change depending on the time of year and how quick the sun is setting. A good resource if you're interested in shooting at sunrise and sunset are apps that are specifically made for your smartphone. They're great for tracking the location of the sun and telling users the exact times of golden hours, sunrise and sunset for specific days. You can even check out data for days that are months away if you're pre-planning for a shoot. A good resource for Apple users is the app called Lumi, and for Android users there's an app called Sun Surveyor. Now all this talk about sunrise and sunset doesn't mean that you can't get great looking aerial footage during the middle of the day. It's really just to say that midday shooting is the most common because it's the easiest time of day for most people to be up and shooting. You can get great vibrant colors during midday because the shadows will be at their shortest, revealing the bright colored treetops and terrain. Not to mention the bright blue sky, and if there's some scattered clouds, this can really break up the sky and give a real sense of depth to the landscape shots. Also, there's less chance of encountering harsh light flares since the sun's going to be directly overhead. In the next lesson, we're going to look at the best camera settings for your aerial camera and how you can avoid some common problems with aerial footage. In this lesson, we're going to learn about the best settings for your drone camera and how you can avoid common problems with aerial footage. The settings on your drone camera are easy to overlook, however they play a huge factor in determining how good your aerial footage is going to look in the end. Think about it this way, no matter how great the flight and the scenery is on your shot, if the settings aren't set up properly, your shot's going to still be subpar. Think of your camera settings as your foundation. If they aren't set up properly before the shoot, everything is going to be affected. I'm going to be covering a lot of camera settings inside of the DJI Pilot app. However, these camera settings are pretty universal, so even if you're not using the DJI Pilot app or using another camera setup, these setting recommendations are the same regardless of camera or brand. The first setting you're going to want to adjust on your camera, and it's probably the most important in my opinion, is the picture profile. Depending on your camera, this may also be listed under color profile or style, etc. For this setting, you're going to want to select the flattest profile possible, which is likely going to be listed under the profile called flat. Or you can manually adjust the settings to be flat, which is what's required on the DJI Pilot app. Filming in flat, low contrast picture profile will give you a better dynamic range when filming. This is going to prevent the highlights from blowing out and the darks from being too black, and it's going to retain the most color information. And this is going to help immensely when grading footage in post. While you're recording in the flat profile, the image will look washed out with low saturation and low contrast. This is normal, again, to give you the most leeway in post-production. If your camera doesn't have a flat picture profile to select, cameras typically have a custom option you can set up to be flat. This is what DJI users will have to do. Under the custom style options, set the sharpness to -1, the contrast setting to -2, and the saturation setting to -2. Feel free to play around and tweak these settings to fit your style. Some cameras may also offer a color option along with a style option, for artistic purposes like filters and etc. If your camera has this option, it's a good idea to set it to none or to log. The log color options will pull the most color information from your camera's sensor, again giving you more leeway in color grading and post-production. Next is your white balance option. This is going to depend on what and when you're shooting, but typically you're just going to be shooting in the daylight or cloudy settings. I don't think I've ever filmed in any other white balance modes with my drone. I usually film with the cloudy white balance mode because it adds a bit of a warmer tone to the footage, but this is really just a personal preference. However, one white balance setting I highly recommend never using is the auto white balance. This can change your white balance between shots at the same shoot, and it's going to be a nightmare to color correct in post. Now let's take a look at ISO. ISO may also be referred to as gain on your camera, and this can help bring up the exposure of your image when filming in a dark location. However, this introduces more image noise the higher you go. And since most drone camera sensors are small, this noise can quickly turn your image into a mushy mess, degrading nearly everything about the image. It can also be quite deceptive when you're viewing it on your small controller monitor. What looks great on a small screen can look horrid when reviewing the footage on your computer. My recommendation is to set the ISO as low as it can go on your aerial camera and leave it there. If you need to adjust your exposure, use your shutter speed instead. And just know that if you do increase the ISO, the image will suffer. Shutter speed is a very important and powerful aspect of aerial footage. It can make your footage look tack sharp, blurry, or even cause the footage to strobe. All of these may or may not be desired results, so it's a good idea to understand them. Shutter speed is often confused with frame rate. Whereas frame rate is how many frames per second your video captures, shutter speed is how quick each one of those frames is captured. This is important when it comes to drone footage. Just as a reference, here's a picture that I took with a DSLR while I was spinning. This is at 1/30th of a second shutter speed. And this is at 1/1000th of a second shutter speed. These are just one frame, but will give you quite different results. And now you may be thinking, well, I'll just use a higher shutter speed all the time. But that can lead to another problem called strobing. Because there's less motion blur, the frames tend to jump or strobe instead of flowing smoothly. This is most common when you're flying closer to the ground or to trees, since they are moving past the camera at a faster rate. Here's an example of a shot with a lower shutter speed. And here's the exact same shot in a higher shutter speed. You can use higher shutter speeds when you're up higher in the air. I typically try to find a good medium around 1/120th of a second for my shutter speed. This gives me good sharpness on my image and doesn't strobe as much. However, if I'm going to be flying closer to treetops or objects, I'll lower my shutter speed to prevent strobing. I'll also lower my shutter speed in the evening if it's a little bit darker and I need to brighten up my image. You can also increase your shutter speed if you want to darken your image. Let's say you're filming on a real sunny day and the highlights are getting blown out. However, a better solution for this may be to use an ND filter, like this one that comes with the DJI Inspire 1. This will cut down on light entering the camera and allow you to use a lower, more manageable shutter speed and prevent the image from being overexposed. Most aerial cameras have the option of using an ND filter, or you can purchase them from third-party companies that manufacture them for your camera. For video resolution size, I would select the highest resolution you can for the frame rates you want. Even if you're going to be outputting the final video at a smaller resolution, the higher the resolution you record in generally will result in more detailed image when you downscale the video. An example of this would be filming in 4K or 2K and then in the editing process, editing at 1080p, essentially downscaling the footage, which is going to help the footage look better. Doing this results in a sharper image than even if you just filmed in 1080p with your drone. Filming at a high resolution like 4K will also give you the flexibility to crop in on your image in post and not lose much resolution. You can also do this with 1080p footage if you're going to be outputting at 720p. The only times that you should be forced to film at a lower resolution is when you need to film at a higher frame rate, like 60 frames per second, which might mean you have to only film in 1080p. Filming in 60 frames per second will give you the option to convert the footage to 30 or 24 frames in post, giving you a smoother slow motion effect on the footage. One thing to note is all the camera settings I've covered so far are for video settings. However, if you want to do photos, you don't have to change much. The one setting you would want to adjust for aerial photos would be the shutter speed. The higher the shutter speed is on photos, the better the image is going to look because there's going to be less motion blur. You may also want to adjust the sharpness setting under your picture profile from 0 to +1. Hopefully you found these recommended camera settings useful. I'm also going to include a PDF download for this lesson that shows the exact camera settings I use with my DJI camera and my GoPro Hero 4 camera, so you can use them or compare them with your own. In the next lesson, we're going to examine the DJI GO app, examining its various options and features. In this lesson, we're going to examine the features of the DJI GO app, which is commonly used with UAVs like the Phantom 3 and the Inspire 1. DJI has expressed interest in getting more involved with creating an operating system for all universal UAVs, even ones that are not created by DJI, but are yet compatible with their own branded operating system. And I will say personally, out of all the UAV manufacturers on the market right now, the DJI GO app is by far the best operating system for drone and camera control that I've seen. Even if you don't have a DJI drone that uses the DJI GO app, you may still want to check out what this app has to offer. If you're not interested in this, feel free to skip ahead to the next lesson, since I'll only be covering the DJI GO app functions during this lesson. Alright, let's get started. There's a variety of ways you can use the DJI GO app. DJI has recently expanded its functionality and changed the name of the app from the DJI Pilot app to the DJI GO app, which has also added some social sharing features for people that wanting to share their aerial images and video. We're primarily going to be focusing on the actual use of the app before and during a flight. When you first open the app, you're going to be presented with 4 different tabs. Equipment, which is a tab you use to connect directly to your UAV. Library, where you can review media and clips taken with your UAV. The Explore tab, where you can look at other aerial pictures and videos from other users and share your own. And the Me tab, where you can sign in to your own personal DJI account and manage your online account settings and contact DJI support. We're going to be going to the Equipment tab. Before connecting the app to our drone, we first need to connect our mobile device to the controller using a USB cable connection. Then we need to boot up the remote controller. Now, as long as your UAV is in a safe location, you can go ahead and boot that up too. You should see a green light on the controller confirming the connection between the drone and the controller. If you're using an iPad, you may see a pop-up asking if you can trust this computer. Go ahead and click Trust. Now we can select Enter Camera View, where we can now see a large variety of specs and numbers on the screen that are part of the DJI GO HUD. This may be a bit overwhelming and intimidating at first, but it's really quite easy. The first pop-up we'll see is the aircraft state. This shows the status of many options on our UAV, radio channel quality, flight mode, battery life, memory card capacity, etc. With all the DJI UAVs, it's a good idea to calibrate your compass at each location you're going to be flying at. You can do this from the aircraft state menu. If you choose the menu and you want to return to it, just press the top center button on the screen, which shows you the current aircraft state. The app gives you a variety of menu options, most of which are located at the top menu bar on the screen. In the top left corner is the home menu, which takes you back to the home menu of the DJI GO app. The next menu is in the top left is your aircraft settings. The first on this list is the MC settings, which lets you set your maximum altitude, distance, landing gear settings, and some more advanced options. Next down on the aircraft settings list is the RC settings, which gives you options to connect your controller or multiple controllers. Next is the image transmission settings. This is great for helping you to select channels with the least amount of interference, and you can adjust the transmission quality of the megabits per second. I typically leave mine at the lowest setting of 4 megabits per second just because I feel like I can get the most range from this setting. You can also adjust your output setting in this menu if you want to output a live feed to a second screen. Next is the aircraft battery menu, which shows all of your current battery specs. It gives you the current percentage of battery power remaining, lets you set low battery warnings at specific percentage points, shows the voltage and how many times the battery has been charged, and more. Next is the gimbal settings menu, where you can select the gimbal mode, adjust the gimbal roll, and some more advanced tweak settings. Next is the general settings menu, where you can select the units of measurement if you want to output a live feed to YouTube, or if you want to show your flight route on a GPS map. There are other various settings such as clearing your video cache, etc. In the bottom left corner, you can see the UAV's orientation and some different flight stats such as the height, distance from the pilot, and the vertical and horizontal speed. In the bottom right corner is the map. Similar to a Google Map view, you can now see where your UAV is located via GPS signal on the map. You can tap the map to enter the map mode and see an enlarged view. From this, you can see your flight path, and you can even draw a flight path with your finger. You will need to be connected to a Wi-Fi signal or a 4G satellite signal on your device in order to see a Google Map style view in this map mode. On the left middle of the screen, you're going to see 4 quick access icons. These icons allow for auto takeoff, return to home, auto land, and control different gimbal modes. and to set a home point from your UAV. On the middle right hand side is the camera functions menu. This allows you to change your video and picture settings, much like a menu on a traditional camera. You can select your video size, white balance, picture style, color profile. You can press the red button to start recording a clip, and you can also quickly play back a clip. Finally, from the bottom of this menu, you can adjust your camera's settings, such as ISO, shutter speed, and choose between manual and auto modes. If you change the flight mode from P to F on the controller, you will gain access to the Intelligent Flight Mode menu. In this menu, you can set up a point of interest and have your UAV continuously orbit the area you want to get footage of. This makes orbit shots a lot easier. You can also set up a flight path, and then your UAV will follow that path automatically, and you can just focus on controlling the camera. One last feature I'll go over on the DJI GO app. If you go back to the home menu, you're going to see it hidden in the top right corner is the DJI Academy page, where you can quickly access digital manuals for your drone, video tutorials, and even access a flight simulator that is useful to train on. Hopefully you enjoyed this review of the DJI GO app. In the next lesson, we're going to look at some maintenance issues that can arise with your drone and what you can do to keep them in check before you take flight. In this lesson, we're going to examine different maintenance issues that may arise with your drone and what you can do to keep them in check before flying. Just like a vehicle or any other piece of equipment that's going to be used outdoors, you're going to get buildup of different elements that are going to arise on your drone and that will need to be cleaned off. Dust can pose problems if the dust buildup isn't cleaned off and maintained properly. Aside from just getting dust on the lens of the camera, drones are going to attract dust to the rubber dampeners that are typically located above the gimbal of the drone. Because these are softer with a rubber texture, dust and grime will stick to them a lot more than other areas. Use a cloth or a moist wipe to wipe away the dust. I don't recommend using paper towels because they can leave kind of a fibrous residue that can stick to the drone as well. You may also want to use a spray duster like the common ones used for electronics equipment. Bugs, just like on your car windshield, are going to leave residue on your drone. The props basically act as a vacuum, pulling flying bugs into them. You want to give your drone and props a quick wipe down with a wet cloth from time to time. Not only because it will keep your drone looking like new, but the buildup on the props could cause uneven airflow or other problems. Just use a bit of water on a towel to clean off your drone, and don't use any household cleaners because this could cause the plastic housing to actually crack. Always check your UAV camera and ND filters before flying to make sure they're spotless. Use lens cleaner with chamois wipes to prevent streaks that can cause glares or unwanted flaring. And monitor your camera for bug smudges that could occur during the flight as well. And if possible, always use an ND or clear protection filter over your UAV camera for that extra protection on your lens. It's also a good idea to always check your drone regularly for cracks on the drone itself and on the props. Cracks on props can be very bad, resulting in breaks mid-flight. Look for splits on the edges or even down the middle of the prop blades. And never fly with a broken or damaged prop. It's best to just throw them away immediately, that way you don't accidentally grab them by accident. I also recommend always packing a spare set of props with you whenever you go on a shoot, just in case you chip a prop or discover a crack you didn't notice before. Humid environments can also pose problems for drones if you're not prepared. A lot of times on early morning shoots, you'll open up your drone case and get everything set up, and then you'll notice a heavy fogging on the camera lens. You'll need to be prepared for this, packing a dry towel with you on every shoot. This way you can wipe away the excess moisture. You may also notice moisture build up on the battery and the body of the drone after flying in high humidity. Again, use a dry towel to wipe this away after each UAV flight. Check the battery and gimbal connections regularly on your drone to make sure they're free of grime and dust. A lot of times a bad connection can result in a battery warning or seemingly battery problems. I've had a few instances where I thought I had a faulty battery, but all I really need to do is just give the connectors a quick wipe down. Finally, always check and install drone updates for your drone regularly. This can seem like a huge pain because some of DJI's UAVs take about 15 to 20 minutes to install their new updates, so you'll want to do this before any scheduled shoots and not do it at the shoot location. Also, always take your UAV out for a safety test flight after doing a software update and before you go out on a scheduled shoot. This way you're ensured the update went smoothly and you don't have any surprises on the day of your shoot. Make sure you conduct the test flight away from people in an open area and run through the typical movements you're going to be doing and shooting techniques you would normally perform on your drone flights. In the next lesson, we're going to go over some pre-flight checklists and how you can properly prepare for an upcoming shoot. In this lesson, we're going to go over some pre-flight checklists and how you can properly plan for an upcoming shoot. It's a great idea to have multiple checklists you can run through before every UAV location shoot. I have 6 different checklists that I run through at different stages when planning and before flying in a scheduled shoot. As they say, the devil's in the details, and you want to be prepared for anything. All the checklists I go over in this lesson will be available as a PDF download you can print out and use for your own UAV shoots. I'm also a strong believer in keeping a hard copy of all my checklists with me in my UAV case. That way, whenever I need it, I have it and I can review it. I printed out 6 different checklists, I laminated them and placed them on a keyring so I can easily flip through them. 3 of my checklists are advanced preparation checklists and 3 are day of checklists. I'm going to go ahead and review them in the order I normally do before a shoot. The first checklist is a location scout checklist. Before filming at a location, either for yourself or for a client, it's a good idea to run through all of these procedures. First, confirm the address of the location with your client and go ahead and visit the location in advance if that's possible. I highly recommend doing this, but I understand that it's not always possible. Next, scout the location on Google Maps so you can go ahead and get a bird's eye view of the area and see what's surrounding it. Also, check online for a VFR map of the area, that's visual flight rules, or check a UAV safety map like Mapbox to ensure you're not flying in a no-fly zone and are more than 5 miles away from any major airports. Next, go ahead and pre-vision the shots you're going to need and the flight areas you're going to have to be in order to get the shots. Identify safe areas to take off and land your UAV at, and also look at areas that are best suited to maneuver to in case of a crash landing. Also, you're going to want to gain permissions for the property if the client isn't the property owner. Check the weather forecast and see what the weather outlook is for the day of the scheduled shoot. Next is the mission planning checklist. In this checklist, you're going to review your shoot goals and how you're going to accomplish them. The first step is scenario, or the big picture of what you're wanting to accomplish, such as client goals, the weather for the shoot, and the type of terrain that's going to be shot. The next step is the mission, or the specific goals that you want to accomplish in the shoot. This is something you can come back to and review should the client have a suggestion or a change on the day of shooting. The next step is the execution. How are you going to get the aerial shots? Reviewing your flight paths, shot list, the timing, and the safety procedures. Next is Murphy's Law, so think about what can happen at the shoot and what you should be prepared for. Next are the logistics of the shoot, being prepared with proper clothes, food, equipment, and in case of an emergency. Finally is the command, reviewing your communication methods when you'll be at the location as well as your role during the shoot, such as being the director, the cinematographer, or just the pilot. The next is the drone pack checklist, which is typically going to take place in the day or night before an actual shoot. The first is the number of UAVs you're going to be taking with you. Step 2 is having the UAV batteries charged and packed. Step 3 is the controller batteries are charged and packed. Step 4, the controller screens and controllers are packed. Step 5, mobile devices are charged and packed. Next, check your drone for software updates. Have your camera batteries charged and packed. Electronic cables packed. Props and fasteners packed. Have your memory cards formatted and go ahead and pack them. Next, do a visual drone inspection. Then go ahead and seal up your drone cases. Next, have your backup items packed, such as memory cards or anything else you think you need to back up. Also pack an emergency kit, and finally pack some eye protection. Now let's learn about the 3 day of checklist that should be reviewed the day of an aerial shoot. The first is the morning checklist. These are things that need to be examined early on the day of a planned shoot to ensure no surprises arise or if the shoot needs to be rescheduled due to problems. First, check the weather forecast for the day, look at the wind speed, the percentage chance of rain. Also go ahead and check the K-index for the day to ensure there's not going to be any geomagnetic storms occurring. Next, confirm the shoot is still on with the client. Have printout aerial maps of the shoot location ready. Ensure the drones are packed and loaded into the proper vehicle. Next, ensure any other production gear that you're going to need is packed and also loaded in the proper vehicle. Have your personal items packed and loaded. Have printout directions to the location you're going to be shooting at ready, and don't just rely on your built-in phone GPS because you never know, you might not have service at that remote location. Finally, make sure your vehicle is trip ready. The next checklist is the pre-flight checklist, which should be reviewed with your drone at the location right before you're about to take flight. First is the latest firmware up to date. Next, do a visual inspection of your drone. Next, install the battery and make sure that it's fully charged. Then install the props and lock them into place. Next, check and see if you need an ND filter or any other filter. Next, insert your memory card into the camera and make sure it's formatted. Next, install any camera batteries if your drone requires them. Next, adjust the brightness on your controller's screen, monitor, or tablet. Next, are you going to be standing in the shade or do you need a monitor hood for your controller? Next, turn the transmitter on, then turn on the UAV. Next, make sure you have a GPS lock achieved and then do a compass calibration. Next, adjust your minimum height. Next, adjust your return to home minimum height. Next, select your transmission frequency and data rate. The next step is to make sure your camera picture profile is selected. Next, ensure the takeoff location is safe and clear of problems. Make sure your emergency locations for landing or malfunction are identified and they're clear of people. Next, if you use any protective eyewear, go ahead and put that on. Make sure the immediate flight area is clear of people. And finally, now it's time to take off. The final checklist is for a quick reference of safety procedures in case of an accident. The first on this list is for a UAV flyaway, in which case you lose contact or signal with your UAV and it begins to drift away on its own. Before anything, don't panic in these situations. The first step is to push the return to home button if you have one. Next, go ahead and warn people that are in the immediate surrounding area. Identify the last known direction of your drone. Next, identify the last distance reading on your controller from your current location. Next, identify and acknowledge the remaining battery life you had on your drone and estimate how much more time it's going to be in the air. Identify the last GPS location where the last signal was received from your drone, if you have map mode or if you have a printout map of the area. Next, you're going to have to determine if you want to go ahead and pursue your drone in a vehicle or if you just want to stay at your current location. Finally, hunt for your drone within the estimated crash radius if you suspect your drone has crashed. Next on the safety procedures checklist are things to do in the event of an immediate or expected UAV malfunction and crash. The first thing to do is quickly verbally warn everyone in the area there's going to be an imminent crash about to occur. Next, turn off your transmitter. If your drone does crash to the ground, there's a good chance it's still going to be active, so make sure you stand back until it becomes inactive. Next, go ahead and take photos of the immediate damage. Next, assess the damage that's been done to your UAV. Also assess any property damage if anything like that has occurred in the crash. Next, contact your insurance or UAV warranty provider. Again, all of these checklists are available as a PDF download for you to print out and to use on your own UAV shoots. In the next lesson, we're going to examine some common UAV flight rules and FAA regulations. In this lesson, we're going to look at some common UAV flight rules and some FAA guidelines. We're also going to look at the process of applying for an FAA commercial use exemption. First, you're going to need to determine the purpose of your UAV flight. Is it for recreational use or commercial use? The FAA defines recreational use as the operation of an unmanned aircraft for personal interest and enjoyment. For example, taking photographs for your own personal use with your drone would be considered recreational use. Using the same device to take photographs or videos for compensation or sale to another individual would be considered commercial operation. Let's take a look at some current FAA safety guidelines that are currently recommended for recreational UAV users. These guidelines were developed by the Academy of Model Aeronautics, the AMA. The first rule is to fly no higher than 400 feet or 120 meters from your initial takeoff location. Next, keep your UAV in eyesight at all times. Remain clear and avoid all other manned aircraft at all times as well. Do not intentionally fly over unprotected persons or moving vehicles, and remain at least 25 feet away from individuals or vulnerable property. Contact the airport control tower before flying within 5 miles of any airport, or just avoid flying within 5 miles of any airports altogether. Do not fly in adverse weather conditions where there's low visibility or high wind. Do not fly under the influence of alcohol or any other drugs. Ensure the operating environment is safe and that the operator is competent and proficient in the operating of UAVs. Do not fly near or over sensitive infrastructure property such as power stations, water treatment facilities, correctional facilities, heavily traveled roadways, or government facilities, etc. Check and follow all local laws and ordinances before flying over private property. And finally, don't conduct surveillance or take photos of people where there's an expectation of privacy. The FAA and the Department of Transportation have recently created a drone registration process that applies to all recreational users. Prior to flying, you'll need to register your drone on the registermyuas.faa.gov. From there, you'll be given a registration number for your drone. This process is now required by law even if you're just flying for fun. The fee for the registration is usually around $5. Now, if you're interested in flying your drone commercially, the FAA has also recently created new rules and licenses for pilots that want to fly commercially. These rules are often referred to as the Part 107. To operate a drone under Part 107 guidelines, you will need a Remote Pilot Airman Certificate, which is essentially your commercial drone license. You'll need to be at least 16 years or older to qualify for the certificate. First, you'll need to take an initial aeronautical knowledge test at an FAA-approved test center. This is often referred to as a CATS test center, which stands for Computer Assisted Testing Service, and is a FAA-approved testing service. I've included a link to a PDF that lists all of the CATS testing centers in the United States offering the Remote Pilot Airman Certificate test. Without getting overly technical, I just recommend that you call the nearest testing center to you and tell them that you're interested in taking the commercial drone test. They'll typically know what this means and they'll schedule you from there. After you pass the test, you'll need to submit your application on the Integrated Airman Certification and Rating Application page, also known as IACRA. Basically, after you pass your knowledge test, you'll need to submit your application there. It will take about 10 days for your application to be processed. During this time, the FAA performs a security background check. After that is approved, you'll be emailed a temporary certificate which will allow you to start flying commercially immediately. A hard copy license will be mailed to you within 90 days. Finally, you'll need to register your commercial drone on registermyuas.faa.gov. A $5 registration fee will also apply. It's important not to forget this final step to avoid potential FAA fines in case of an accident. It's also important to know that just because you passed your Part 107 test and have a remote pilot license, you are still restricted to the airspaces that you can fly in. Operations in Class G airspace are allowed without any air traffic control permission. However, operations in Class B, C, D, and E airspace need air traffic control approval first. You can get this by applying for an airspace waiver on FAA.gov. These waivers can take a while to process though, so you'll want to plan your flights in regulated airspace well in advance. Typically, a month is about the time needed to get authorization. And typically, but not always, these restricted airspace locations are located within 5 miles of an airport. So if you avoid flying near airports, you should be clear, but again, you want to make sure and check your aeronautical maps. Hopefully this lesson helped answer some of your legal questions regarding drones. If you're unsure about anything or have any other questions, reach out to the UAS Aviation Safety Inspector in your state. It's their job to answer any questions you have regarding commercial drone flights or drone operations. I'll also have links for everything I mentioned in this lesson on the blog post, and I'll have a link for the FAA Know Before You Fly page. This has been Charles Yeager for Envato Tuts Plus. Thanks for watching. In this lesson, we'll examine the process of qualifying and applying for UAV aviation insurance. Even if you're just going to be flying your UAV recreationally, or if you're going to be flying it often, it's a good idea to acquire liability insurance so you'll be covered if your drone is in an accident, damages property, or causes injury to a person. Traditional liability insurance does not cover UAVs, so you're going to need aviation insurance. You're free to choose an aviation insurance broker that suits your needs, but I'm going to be going over the process I use using the aviation insurance broker called Transport Risk Management. Transport Risk Management requires UAV pilots to meet 2 different criteria before they can apply for aviation insurance. The first is having completed 100 to 200 successful flights with the drone that you're planning on applying for insurance with. You'll need to keep what is called a flight log, either written or on a computer spreadsheet, and it's a good idea to always log the flight number, the location of the flight, the time of day, weather conditions, and the specific drone used. The second criteria is completing an online insurance qualification class. This is an online class offered by a company called Unmanned Experts that has teamed up with Transport Risk Management. This class is roughly 20 hours long and has quizzes to help test your aviation knowledge. Topics covered during the class include aeronautical background information, radio communication procedures, human factors, basic small UAV aerodynamics, weather factors, decision making, and safe operating procedures. The class is roughly $100, but I highly suggest you contact your aviation insurance broker first before you take any online qualification classes, just because you want to make sure that those classes meet your broker's criteria. I also believe that the government's UAV licensing program, once it's established, is going to follow a very similar format to that of the Unmanned Experts training class. So people who take courses like that should have a head start on knowing what's required to obtain a UAV pilot's license. Once you've met these 2 criteria, you're going to need to fill out some forms and send those to your aviation insurance broker, informing them of how often you plan on flying your UAV, the purpose of your flights, and other specifics regarding your drone. They will then send you a coverage comparison proposal showing the yearly rates from different aviation insurance carriers. A rough estimate you can expect to pay to insure your drone with a $1 million liability policy is around $800 to $1,000 a year. In the next lesson, we're going to examine a variety of different service ideas you can offer with your new drone skill set. In this lesson, we're going to examine a variety of different service ideas you can offer with your drone. The potential for growing drone use is really unlike anything we've seen recently. Drones just provide such a cost-effective solution for obtaining amazing aerial shots that a decade ago would have been impossible to get. Because of this, the business potential and growth is huge right now. I'm going to run through a list of businesses that are currently benefiting from UAV use that you might want to get involved with your new drone skill set. The first is pretty obvious, and that's regional and local production companies. It's a good idea to contact your local production companies in your area because the odds are they may not own a UAV yet, but are needing some drone shots for their work. Also, if you already have aviation insurance, that's going to go a long ways in convincing them to use your UAV services. If anything, it's just going to get you on their radar. Next is real estate photography. There's no better way to showcase real estate than from a drone. This makes property look bigger and showcases the layout of the property and the surrounding area. This is one of the fastest growing markets for drones, and along the real estate line is property surveying. Many property owners just want to see their current property from an aerial perspective, which can help them greatly when it comes to future layout plans of the property. Concerts and other local city events are always looking for creative ways to make themselves stand out. Nothing helps an event or a concert video stand out more than a breathtaking shot of the crowd and the atmosphere. Construction and safety inspections have also become very popular. A roof inspection now, for example, can now be completed much quicker by simply having a UAV that can fly up, record some clips, and then send those to the client to be reviewed. Yacht and boat sales are another area. You no longer have to try and keep the camera platform balanced on the water, and it's much easier to get a wide shot showcasing boats from above. Farmers are also benefiting from drone pilots, because using a UAV you can highlight areas of the farmer's land from above that might not be getting proper water, or they can even identify problem areas on large plots of land very quickly. A lot of golf courses and country clubs are also hiring drone pilots now to create what is called course maps. Basically doing a flyby aerial shot of each hole on the course, posting it on their website so the golfers interested in the course can get a full showcase of all 18 holes. And these are just some of the potential business uses for UAVs. Hopefully this list helps give you some new ideas and will help keep you thinking outside the box when it comes to uses for your drone. In the next lesson, we're going to recap some of the main points of this course, and I want to leave you with a few extra bonus drone tips. In this last lesson, I'm going to recap a few things from this course. I'm also going to leave you with a few extra tips to use when flying your drone. The first is limit your distractions before and while flying your UAV. No matter how much training you have, distractions will affect your judgment. So be mindful if other people are around you, and the last thing you want to do is right when you get your drone up in the air, you have people come up to you asking you questions and distracting you from operating your UAV. Next, I would suggest you acquire more than one battery for your drone. This is good because while you're flying, your other battery can be charging. And when you're on a shoot, it's just too big of a risk to depend on just one battery to get all the shots you need. Also on shoots, you may want to invest in a folding table that will make prepping your drone much easier, preventing you from having to crouch down and do all of the prep on the ground. Or a much cheaper solution, and one that I've done, is just to purchase some foam poster board, cut it in half, and then use gaff tape to reattach the pieces, giving you an easy way to fold it up. This can then be used on grass or on top of your drone case to give you a platform to work on and take off from. Plus, it's really lightweight. I also encourage you to shoot at 30 frames per second. That way, if your project is at 24 frames per second, you can then interpret the footage in post from 30 to 24, which is going to kind of slow the footage down just a little bit and give you a little bit more of a cinematic feel on the footage. Small things like this can make a huge difference. Also, get in a habit of checking what is called the K index. This measures electromagnetic interference from the sun. This fluctuates depending on the day, and these signals could interfere with the communications between your transmitter and your drone. Just use caution on days that have a really high K index, and I don't recommend trying to break your distance record on those days. I'll provide a link where you can check the daily K index. Finally, I highly recommend placing a little silica packet inside of your drone case. This will absorb any moisture that might get left on your UAV when you pack it away, and you can use any silica packet. They're often included in shipping boxes, or you can order some bigger ones online for just a few dollars. I hope the things that I covered in this course will help you to create great aerial footage. Again, I'm Charles Yeager for Tuts Plus. Thanks for watching.